Right, let me just get the Instagram feed going. Start. There we go. Okay. Yeah, there we are. Right, both of those bits are now working. Right, I have just dashed over here because I thought I got everything sorted and then went, where's my iPad? And just had to run around the house going, where have I put it? What have I done with it? But we are now all sorted, so apologies, we are slightly chaotic there. Okay, that's better. That's also better. Even managed to get the inspiration image actually ready on my laptop this morning, so I mean we're already winning in comparison to last month. I've got a super busy week because I'm heading over to the Isle of Man on Friday in a rescheduled workshop booking, so I am sort of squeezing in lots of work and not very much time, but we are going to get the September seasonal changes colourway dyed. Because I had to dash over and try and work out where I put my iPad. I haven't reached any stuff out yet, so I'm going to chatter away just while I am reaching out all the jugs and everything that normally I've got ready beforehand. Fibre went into soak Monday actually because I was out yesterday, so that's all ready to go. It was a really close, it was actually a tie between Imperfect and Pear Plum of the colours that we were voting on in the Fellowship of Yarn this month. So I decided that I was going to cast my dyer's prerogative vote, and I've gone for Imperfect, which is the bluey greeny colour palette, simply because we had purples in July, so I thought, right, okay, it's time for a change, we'll do something that's not purple. So we're going to dye some blues and greens and a yellow as well in there, rather than the purples that we've had previously. Right, let me grab those bits. Okay, so yeah, as I say, I had a bit of dashing around because I couldn't find my iPad that I'd picked up and put down to bring out, and then, you know, you put things in a safe place. And you're like, this isn't where I thought I left it, but we're sorted now. Okay, so Imperfect is our colour palette with blues and greens. As ever, for those of you who have been here before, you will now know the drill. These are not exact dyeing tutorials. They are me talking through the process of what dyes are going onto the wool to make this month's seasonal changes packs. Sometimes me talking it through live doesn't go very well. There's something about having to try and talk at the same time as doing that sort of it affects the flow of doing it sometimes. So like last month, I think I ended up re-dyeing 2 of the different colours because they just weren't, they didn't look how I wanted them to. But blues, I like blues and greens better, so hopefully we can get a more successful blues and greens on the go out of here. Let me find, I have a feeling, ooh, that's the other thing that minor mix up on. I need to bring a new notebook over here. So we will go for scrap paper, and I will have to reach myself out a new recipe notebook because I've filled the old one. We are going to start off with, let's start off with some blues. So for those of you who are still coming along and joining us, edit screen. Done. That's the colour palette we're doing. Okay, so these blues and greens, because we had peaches last time, and I think the colourway was called Each Peach, and somebody jokingly said, are we going to have Pear Plum next week, next month? So I then was like, well, yes, we are. So we've sort of done puns on pears and plums for all the colour options this time. Let's start off with this blue. So when I'm looking at these colour palettes, I'm always going darks, mid-tones, lights, because when we're using them for stripes and colourworks, it's also about having tonal contrast, not just having variety of colours. So we've got this, a very, very, very dark green, which is going to be our darkest colour. We've then got an olive and this blue, which are going to be our mid-tones. and then we've got a pale sage and a yellow, which are going to be the colours in the middle. So we're going to go in with two different tonal blues actually. It's quite a rich, multifaceted blue. There's lots of variation in it, so I'm kind of trying to make sure that I reflect that in the way that I mix this colour. So just by itself, this is going to be a little bit sort of bright and primary toned. So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to put in some grey. So this grey is a blue toned grey, and it'll just knock the intensity off it, but it shouldn't make it too muddy. It should still make it quite a nice, yeah, there we go. Just still make it into quite a nice, interesting shade of blue. There's a little bit of depth to it, but it's not gone too dark. So that is number one. Happy with that. Always like it when one goes well at the start. Like when I'm flailing around trying to get the first colour and it's not working, it's like oh, it's going to be one of those days. So that blue I'm really happy with. I think that's going to look really, really sort of pleasing with the rest of this colour palette. I'm going to do the other mid-toned green. I'm just going to give this yellow a bit of a shake, because it has a tendency to form like a little bit of a sediment when it's left overnight. The dye dissolves really well, but it doesn't stay in solution very well. So we're going for 1, 2. So this is my pre-mixed olive green. And then I've put some more yellow into it because it's a very, very yellowish toned green. Let's have a look at that. So, get rid of that off the spoon. Okay, there we go. So that's going to be our very yellow toned olive. So I've just brightened it up a little bit by adding some more of that yellow into it, and I suspect that's going to be about the right colour that we're after. So again, it's always really hard when I waft the bits of kitchen roll up onto the screen for you to see. They always look so much darker than they actually end up being. Next one we're going to have a go at doing is we're going to go for the very, very darkest colour. So I'm going to go back to my olive green dye that I've got going on over here. Change the angle on there slightly so that you can see more of me and less of the random mess up the corner. Let's go. 1, 2, 3. And this is a really dark colour, and I need to make sure that it's darker than all the other shades there. So I'm going to add a full measure of black in there. Let me write that down before I forget. And then that way, if I want to change it, I know what I did in the first place. So this is almost a black. It's like a black with a hint of green to it. So I've achieved that by using an awful lot of dye. That always makes things dark. But I have added some black into it as well. So that's our black, green black. Tonally, it's actually a really nice match for what I'm seeing on the screen. I'm trying to decide if it's dark enough or if it needs any more black in it. The problem with putting more black in is it will make it less green and it will start to make it muddier, because the black dye that I've got is a purple toned black, and purple and green, because they're opposite on the colour wheel, if I use an awful lot of black in there, it's going to take it away from being green and start to shove it in towards being a dark brown. I think just the sheer volume of dye is probably going to achieve what I wanted to with that colour. So I think that one's going to be okay. Right. Oh, we are going well this morning. This is all going to go wrong when I start dyeing the pale colours, isn't it? But so we've done the two mid-tones, we've done the very darkest shade. Next up, I'm going to have a go at doing the two paler colours. So there's like a lemony yellow and a pale sort of sage colour. These probably do not need the full measure that comes out of my dispensers on the wall. So these are designed for when I'm dyeing bigger quantities to make it more efficient to measure out dye, compared to when I'm dyeing 100-gram test quantities and coming up with recipes. So it's not very often that I'm needing to measure out smaller amounts, but these we need less dye. So I've just pulled off, I've got two yellows, one that's a warmer toned one and one that's a very lemony colour. This is definitely the lemony colour that we want, but at the same time I also want to just take it away from being the primary toned yellow, because it's I find it the yellows to be they're quite harsh, ugly colours by themselves. So nearly always I mix them in with other things. So let's go for 10 of yellow. And then what I might do to kind of keep the unity together in this colour palette, I could add black, I could add grey, I could add brown, but it's still it's not a very muddy colour. So I think what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to put in some of the olive dye that I've been using in the rest of the palette, and that in part is going to help make sure that it's a nice unified looking colour scheme. So let's have, make sure we've got no air in there so it's an accurate measure. Let's have 2 olive. So we're actually making a pale, there's dye in there. That's cute. I'm actually making more of a pale yellow toned green is probably closer to what we've got going on, but these dyes always end up it will look more yellow once it's been heat set and once it's been dried. So that's the colour that I have mixed. It doesn't show up spectacularly well. It's a little bit better on my iPad. Let's go back to the original picture again. Yeah, I think that's going to work for us. So that's a yellow with a hint of green, and what I now need is a very, very pale sage green to go with it, because this is what I describe as quite a tight colour palette. So everything is blue, yellow, green. It's all in one very small quadrant of sort of the colour wheel or a spectrum. We haven't got big colour contrasts. So that's why I'm making sure that the tonal values are very different, because otherwise if we're not careful we end up with a colour palette where everything almost ends up looking the same. How little green dye do I want? So what I'm trying to do when I'm looking at the colour palette is I'm trying to decide just how pale I want to go. This might only need, let's start off with 2. So it's a bit like adding salt in cooking. I can always add more dye. I can't take it away once it's there. So I'm going to start off with a very tiny amount of this sagey green. What it might need is it might need some blue adding to it, because what I also want to make sure, so there we go, can you see it's barely there in comparison to this yellow, so it's paler, which I'm happy with, but I think it could just do with a little bit of, it needs to be bluer. You stuck together. Feet of strength. Right, and I'm actually going to use my grey dye for that. Let's add 1 of you. And that's just going to shift this. It's going to make it slightly bluer. It's going to make it slightly, it's going to make sure it's different enough from the yellow. Oh, that's better. Like that more. Okay. So that's the original, and then this is the one that I've just added some grey into, and it's kind of really hard to see on the camera, but I've just made sure, so that and that, these 2 colours here were really going to end up quite similar. I've just added some grey into the olivey colour just to shift it slightly more towards being a blue. Let me pull that up again. And it's just cooled down the temperature of that olive slightly. So I think I'm going to leave that like that. Okay, I do believe we have our colour palette sorted. So I'm going to put them all on the bit of kitchen roll so you can see them all in the order that they are in the inspiration picture. So make sure you've got no blue on there because the next one I want is the yellow. And we want you. Then we want you. And then the very dark colour. Okay, so that's going to be our colour palette. Okay, so we've got the darkest greeny colours, tried to make sure that there's enough contrast between these two. One of them is going to end up being a lot yellower. We've got the two pale colours which are also going to hopefully have enough contrast with them, and then this like warm, well not warm, this turquoisey, quite rich, almost petrol blue, that's kind of the one colour that is quite different in the colour palette, because all the rest is very, very greens and yellows. So next it all needs to go onto our fibre. So all these dyeing methods, they are low water methods, so that there is minimal agitation of the fibre. So the fibre all gets soaked usually overnight. It's actually been 24 hours for this lot because I was out yesterday. But we then squeeze all the water out. It's just plain water with a little bit of washing up liquid in it, just to help make sure everything gets nice and wet. And we just add our dye, and we make sure it's distributed evenly throughout the fibre. So trying to get rid of any white spots. I'm okay with a little bit of tonal variation because this is hand dyed fibre rather than the big commercial dyed done at pressure. Sometimes it's even dyed in pre-processed form even before it becomes comb top. There's different dye mills have different ways of working and doing things. The Italian dye company that I work with, they are just coming back from their August break. One of the things that I've got to do tomorrow is sort out what I want to add on to the order there, because they shut down their factory for the entire month of August. So anything that I need making up there, I have to wait for them to come back from their annual holiday. Because that's why, if anybody's been browsing the online shop recently, there's quite a lot of gaps there. Literally just waiting for I didn't manage to put the order in before August because July was really, really busy. So I've just now got to wait for it to all come back. So if there's anything in particular that you wanted in a particular colour that isn't there at the moment and you definitely want it to come back in stock, send me a message, because that way I can make sure it does get ordered. Because I don't restock all of the colours all the time. I just haven't got enough storage space, because the range and variety of shades they offer is huge. So that's the blue. They'll be back, and that'll be nice to have some full shelves again. I mean, the rest of the studio, actually, the hand dyed stuff, got lots of things to choose from at the moment. I've been able to, because I haven't been away anywhere this summer, because we went away up to the Isle of Harris earlier in May, so I haven't had a summer holiday this year because I had one much earlier. So, and just been taking days off here and there rather than going away for a big long chunk of time. But as a result, the studio is looking really full of lots of lovely hand-dyed fibre. So as the weather gets cooler and you're starting to think about spinning projects again, there should be lots of nice things for you to choose from. Occasionally people have been sending me messages asking about custom dyed stuff, for which I have got the time to do at the moment. I don't always, but it's one of those things that if I can do it, I will do it for people. Which reminds me, I have got an email I need to reply to from somebody who asked me about a custom dyed purple on some Cambrian. Sometimes I have that trouble, you know, when you've looked at an email, thought about the reply you need to make, but you weren't in a position to sort it out just at that type the reply, and then in your head you've actually written it and you haven't. So if you are the person to who is waiting for an email about some purple Cambrian, I will reply to it later today. Okay. But yeah, I need to sort out, I've got, as I say, this trip to the Isle of Man was meant to be happening in June, and I got as far as sitting on a plane in Manchester Airport before EasyJet helpfully cancelled the flight, and that was the only flight that day. So at that point I literally got back on the train and came back home again, but it's meant I've had to refit the booking in, so it's a bit of a could have done without that. But it's fine. I'm looking forward to going over there for a weekend. And then it's back to lots of other stuff going on, lots of job training things, lots of judging of scent work competitions. So, which is quite nice as a non-activity that is not to do with this job, because this job is lovely, but it's nice to have something else that gets me out and about. Right, that's 2 done. So we have done the blue, the yellow olivey colour, and we've got 3 left to do. Then these will go into the oven and be heat set. So the clear stuff that you've seen me putting on, that's citric acid. So all of these dyes are acid dyes. They are the dyes that work best on wool and other protein fibres like silk and alpaca, anything that's grown from an animal basically. And they make nice strong bonds, pretty wash fast. Some of the blues can be a little bit sensitive to being rubbed, that abrasion. So that's why if you ever end up with blue hands when you're spinning, it's just that the blue dye molecules don't form the most stable bonds. Some people's skin chemistry can sometimes be a little bit, just causes the chemistry to not be as secure as would be ideal as it is, well, or as it is for some of the other colours either. I'm just recording, mother. Recording, mother. So they've just got back from the walk. She's just come to go and go, such and such has happened. Okay, yeah. I was thinking I'd be done by the time you got back, but you just went and had a short walk instead. So let's try and time things going on here when there isn't masses of interruptions that are going on. So, but I'm nearly finished here, so I can go find out what it was that she wanted. But yeah, but they're all, so the citric acid gives acidic conditions for the dyes to make a bond onto the fibre. It's basically just super concentrated lemon juice. It's in, if you ever make like sherbet or anything like that, with citric acid. If you like the Haribo gummy sweets, it's citric acid that's on the outside of those. stuff that I buy is actually, it's food grade, and so I do occasionally, if you taste it, you start thinking, oh my goodness, that's so incredibly sour. It sort of proper makes your mouth do that, almost sort of dries it out. So right, okay, 2 pale colours left. So this is the yellow with a hint of green. These always look terrifyingly too green when they go on. Everything looks darker on wet fibre. It always ends up being paler, brighter. But I think that's going to be okay. So more citric acid on that. And that just helps make sure that the water, all the dyes make a really nice bond. And then we have 1 more to go. But yeah, so these will go into the oven. They will be heat set, rinsed, left to dry, photographed, and they will be in the shop on Monday, which I believe is the 1st actually. It was the 1st. Is it the 2nd on Monday? Anyway, definitely not. If the 1st is Sunday, it won't be Sunday because I'm not here. I'm still on the Isle of Man. So it'll likely be Monday, when she'll probably also be when I've got some more fibre dyed to photograph. I've got 1 sack of it sat waiting, and I'm going to dye a little bit more later on this afternoon as well. So there will be little bits and pieces of new stuff going up into the shop. And then, right, last pale colour. So this is the pale bluey greeny colour. Trying to make sure it's nice and evenly distributed throughout the fibre. Sometimes quite hard with these pale colours because there's not a lot of dye to move around. Put a bit over there. So I'm just trying to make sure I only ever squeeze. I'm not like rubbing. As soon as you start rubbing the fibre, that's when you start to create felt. We don't want that. We like our fibre to be nice and soft and spinnable. Okay, go on there. So distribute that around a little bit. Super. It's going to get wrapped up. So this is going to be our finished colour palette. Let me see if I can get it in the same order as the photo. It's always nice when it's that way round. Okay, there we go. So these are all going to be heat set. I'll take a look at them once they're in, once I've rinsed them and spun dry them, because that's given me a really good idea whether they're actually the colour palette's right. I'm pretty pleased with them this month. I think they're going to work. Unlike last month where I went away and re-dyed shed load of them. I am going to crack on and get a little bit more fibre dyed this after the rest of today. And then, as I say, though, these will be in the shop Monday. If you are joining me via Instagram and you're not already a member of the Fellowship of Yarns, there's a link to that in my profile. That's where you get the chance to vote on these colours as to what I'm going to dye next month. I give people a choice of 3, but I don't know what I'm going to dye until I count it up. As I say, this month was a tie, so it was dye's prerogative about which one of the 2 that I chose. So if you feel strongly about which colours it is that end up being dyed each month, do come and join us there. And there's lots of other things, fun things going on. It's where if you share pictures of your spun yarns and things you've made out of the fibre, you can win yourselves Hilltop Cloud gift vouchers. They tend to hear first about things like when 12 Days of Christmas parcels are ready, because I've already started doing the planning for that. It's where we do the Tour de Fleece spin along. Lots of sort of fun and interesting stuff, and lots of people chatting away and sharing images and pictures of their spinning. You don't just have to use Hilltop Cloud Fibre to come and join us there. I hope you all have a lovely rest of the day, and I shall see you all in a month's time when we will be dyeing the fibre for October.